and go through my feet and climb up my legs. There were days where every second of the walk was agonizing. Anybody lived up north? Know what this is like? Michigan's probably worse than it is in Montana because it's a wet, it's pretty bad. Anyway, when I would reach the church, inside it was warm. Friendly faces would look up and greet me, and we would open the Bible, and my body would sink down into itself and relax like a cat preparing to sleep. My whole body would sink down into itself. I said that already. But my mind would be wide awake. I found constant happiness, and I was reading His Word. When the church was over, I would linger as long as I could, and I always refused a ride home from anyone. I was too proud or too shy. My father had done everything but command me to stop attending the church. One night, I started home late. The wind had nothing to block it, and swept waves of powdery snow across the roadway into my face. I also could hear it whistling. I wanted to rest, but I was afraid to stop. I remember stories of trappers freezing to death because they'd stopped to rest and couldn't get up again. I could see the lights of the houses, beautiful homes, like white shells in the snow. "Oh, Jesus," I whispered, "help me." But I went on and somehow walked up the incline past the houses to my own house. It was dark. I felt relieved to be home. I reached for the doorknob and had trouble gripping it. My ice-coated mittens slipped off the cold brass. I went through the slow procedure of taking off my mitten. I finally had to work it off with my teeth. My fingers were just too stiff. I put my hand on the doorknob again and turned it. The door was locked. I tried it again to be sure. There was no question my parents had forgotten that I was out. I hated to wake them up, but I had to get in, so I rang the bell. I watched the window of their bedroom, waiting for the light to go on. It didn't. I rang the bell again, no response. My mother could sleep through that noise, but my father was too light a sleeper. I knew he was awake. I called to him, "Dad, it's me, Bruce. Come down, open the door for me, please. I'm freezing." There was no reply. Although I didn't want to, I started to cry, and the tears froze on my face. "Dad, please, it's Bruce. Let me in." I took a deep breath and held it in. Then I felt a little calmer. I looked up at the dark window again. It seemed to be looking back at me like a dark, hooded eye. Finally, I thought of the Langs. I knew they would take me in, but it was 2 miles to their house, back along the way I had come. "Please, Dad," I called again and waited. There was no response. I turned on my heel and began to run. I ran as hard as I could until I couldn't run any further. When I stopped, my breathing was heaving and the cold air burning my lungs each time I breathed. I made it to the Langs, exhausted and shaking. They got up and gave me a warm place to sleep. That was the worst time, but it wasn't the last, and I never knew whether I would find the house locked or unlocked when I got home. My mother was caught in the middle. She feared my father, and there was little she could do to constrain him. I remember coming home one afternoon and finding her in the kitchen, leaning against the stove, tears staining her beautiful, flawless face and dripping down in splashes on the burners. It frightened me. "Mom, what's the matter?" I asked. Her voice shook. Twice she started talking and couldn't. Finally she said, "Bruce, what's going to hold our family together?" I thought I knew the answer. I've been trying to give it all along, but now, when I was asked, it seemed difficult to phrase. "Mom, we need to be real Christians with Jesus in our lives. There is hope for us," I said. I hadn't expected to make her angry, but when she looked at me, I knew she was both angry and hurt.